If your employees are manually submitting time cards, then I can almost guarantee that you're losing money. One missed entry, one missed clock out, and you're paying for time that never happened. To give you some context, this happened to one of my clients who runs a cleaning business who had her employees email her time cards every week that were all in different formats, and it took her hours to go through every single one. When I went through and audited her process, I could see that she was overpaying her employees, and that's exactly why we created this automation system. The way the system worked is the employee would use a form that we created, so they'd select their name, they would then enter in the job date, the property in which they were cleaning at, and how much they were requesting to get paid. After this form submission went through, we would then pull this into Make.com, take all the information out, and create a record within Airtable, so that way we had a log of all the entries coming in. Once this information hit the Airtable, we then would go ahead and call their CRM using some API calls and get some more information coming in, so that way we could cross-reference how much time they were expected to work and how much time they were working, and then we could also get how much they were supposed to be paid, whether that was hourly or a flat fee, and compare it to the amount of pay that they were requesting through that form. After that, we would then go ahead into the Airtable and create some fields, so that way the managers could just go in there and quickly see, did they spend enough time on the task or did they spend too much time on the task? Were they requesting too much pay based on their hourly rate or the flat fee for that specific job? And all the manager has to do is either click approve or not approve, so that way they could save hours for all these employees submitting time cards, and they could see exactly the time that they worked, so that way it's very easy for them to go through and save money on payroll. So before I go into exactly how I built this system out, I'm just going to run you through a quick demo on how the system works from front to end. So hopping over here to the form, we can go ahead and select the employee name that we want to use, or the employee that's submitting their time card. We select the job date, the date in which they started the job, and then we can select the property in which they worked at and the requested pay. So now, once we do that, we can go ahead and click submit, and it's going to submit this. Come over here to Make.com, where it's going through all these different modules. And right here, we call a sub scenario, which is getting more information from their CRM, so we can get as much information for that manager table. Once we come in here into Airtable, we can see this automation writing all this information, so we can see it from a top-down view. So I'm going to show you this in the back end in the table view, and then we can jump into the interface that we also made for the client as well. And we can see the employee name, the pay requested, the estimated pay, if there's any discrepancy between the pay, if there's any discrepancy between the time that they clocked in and the expected time that they were expected to work for this job, the type of pay for this job, and a whole bunch of more information here, so that way the manager can go through, look at this information, make sure it lines up, and then go ahead and click approve, so that way they can approve this time entry. So let's hop into exactly how I made this system. Starting off with the first step of this whole system is the form fill. Coming over here to the form, I'm using this platform called Fillout. It's a very nice form. It's very similar to Typeform or Jotform, just a little bit more affordable. And honestly, this platform is pretty cool. So definitely go and check it out. They're not paying me to say this. So once we come into here, we can go ahead and select the employee name. And what we did is we can link this up to Airtable, so that way we can just get all the employee names that we have within Airtable to select. And then after this, we use a table, so that way they can easily put in the job date, the property name, as well as the requested pay. And what's cool about this table view is that you can click this add button and it will go ahead and add multiple entries. So let's say they worked on this day, they worked at this property and requested this much pay. They can click add and they can add as many as they need to. Let's say they went to multiple properties in one day, to which we can go ahead and submit all of this and create these records within the Airtable. Now, when they have multiple jobs per day, we split these into different line items, so that way the manager can individually approve the pay for this property and then also individually approve the pay for the other property to keep it very granular and give them as much control as possible. We then come over here into Make.com, where we are watching for these time entries to come in. So we use the fill out form module here. We then go ahead and grab all of this data, all the answers, so the employee name, as well as the information for the job date, the property, and the requested pay. Now, once we have this, we're going to iterate through this just in case there are multiple entries, so that way we can individually create different rows within the Airtable. We then go ahead and extract these values, because right here inside of this iterator, it's going to output these values just like this. And we couldn't map these to any other place down the line. So we had to extract these values and set them as a variable. And then we go ahead and grab the property. And so what we're doing is a search module here for Airtable, where we're searching for the property name in the property table. So if we go over here into Airtable, we can see we have the job entries. This is just where the managers can go ahead and approve jobs or disapprove them. We have the timesheets, which is going to take all of the job entries within 1 week, and then we can see all the ones that get approved onto here, so we can see the total pay that they get per week. We can come over here to the employees table where we can see all the employee names, the location that they work at, and we can also see the pay information, so what their hourly rate is, and if they also get a flat cleaning fee if they go to a specific property and there is a specific flat cleaning fee. And we also have their staff IDs in here as well. And for the last table is the properties table. This is where we can see all the different properties that they have for this cleaning business, as well as we can see the ID for that property within their CRM. And so once we have all of this information, this allows us to get even more granular with the information that we go ahead and pull later down the line. So right here, we're just going to go ahead and do property name, and we're using the property from the fill out form. And so once we grab that data, we can go ahead and create a new time entry within the table. And we're going to fill in the employee name, the pay that they requested, what date that job was on, as well as which property that was for. And so once we create this entry, we're going to wait a couple seconds so we don't hit API limits. We're going to go ahead and format the week start date so that way they can see when the start date was. This is just the Sunday of the beginning of the week, and then so that way they can see the whole week, all the time entries throughout there. So once we get that, we're going to look at the previous weekly entries to see if we're going to add it to the week's entry or if it's going to be a new week's entry. This is a little bit confusing, but don't worry, it will make sense once we see all of the data, and then we can either add a new record or we can update a record within there. So after we make all these records here inside Airtable, we then use a sub-scenario module here in Make.com. And this just allows us to send information from this scenario to the next one. And so we're sending over the record ID, the staff ID, the property ID, the job date, the entry ID, which is like our unique identifier, and then also the staff's name. And we are not waiting for the scenario to finish. After it's done here, this scenario is done. So when we hop over to the second scenario in Make.com, and this is where all the magic happens. This is where we get all this information from their CRM system to counteract and kind of compare what they submitted versus what they were supposed to be working and how long that is. So once we hop into the second scenario here, we go ahead and we make an API call so that way we can get authentication, get our auth token, extract that access token, and then we wait because we're doing about 4 API calls here and we don't want to hit rate limits. So the first one is we're getting staff tasks. Here we go ahead and we are searching using the staff ID, the property ID, as well as the completed date and this end date. And so all these tasks are going to be completed in one day. So we can filter this very granularly so that way we get the best information possible. So now we can look into here and we can see all the information for that specific task. We can see the person's name, their ID, but most importantly, we're getting the pay type out of here. And we're getting the time tracked. So the time tracked is going to calculate how long they spent clocked in for the whole day. This even accounts for if they went to lunch or clocked out throughout the day. So for example, let's say someone comes in at 10 a.m. If they come in at 10 a.m. and then they go to about 1:30 p.m. and they clock out and they go to lunch, then come back around 2:15 p.m., clock back in, finish the task, and then clock back out at 3:30, this time is going to calculate all the time that they were on the clock for, which is super useful if we need to calculate hourly pay. Now for the pay type, there's 3 different types of pay inside of a Payroll, which is their CRM. There's pay type number 1, which is just a flat fee. So we can just take the flat fee amount and put it right into Airtable. And then there's also 2 and 3, which is hourly pays. And this is going to take their hourly rate, multiply it by this time tracked so that way we can get the estimated pay that they were supposed to receive. So this is super crucial that we get this information here. We put a filter here just to make sure we're only getting tasks for that specific staff member. And then after here, we're going to set the task ID so that way we can go to this next API call where we get even more information on this task. So now that we've set this task ID, we go into the next API call, which is get staff task times. Again, we're filtering by the staff ID, the property ID, and the job date. So that way we can get granular information. We come into here into the output, and this is what we're getting. We can see that we have 2 different collections here, which means that there were 2 tasks created on that specific day. Really, it's not 2 tasks. It's just 2 different time entries. And so what we can see here is the first one is that they clocked in at this time and clocked out at this time. And then for the second one, they clocked in at this time and clocked out at this time. Now, these times are definitely a little bit differently. I believe this is in UTC. So we had to convert this time into Pacific time because I believe they are in Arizona. And so once we see this information, now we know that they clocked in multiple times throughout the day, which is super useful information for the manager to know later down the line. So we're going to save this information and we're going to continue. So after this, we're going to iterate through this. So that way we can grab both of those clock in and clock out times. And then we go ahead and do a little bit of math here. If you've never done this inside of Make.com, this is going to look a little bit scary, but trust me, it is not that scary. Use ChatGPT and ChatGPT will get you there until you can just do this off the cuff. I don't even do this off the cuff. I use ChatGPT to help me, especially it's a lot faster than me having to do this. But if you have a bit of a coding background, it's probably going to be a little bit easier just to blow through this and put the math in here. So let's go through this so that way we can break it down. So first is going to be clock in. This is going to say clock in, semicolon, and now we're going to start doing the math. So we're going to format the date in a specific way that we wanted to, and we're also going to parse the date. And so what we're doing is we're taking it from this format right here, which is the year, then the months, then the days, then the hours, minutes, and seconds. And that's in the UTC format. And we're transferring it into hours and minutes. And then we're also transferring it into Los Angeles time, which is Pacific time. Then, secondly, we have a little pipe right here, so that way we can break it up, so that way it's a little bit easier to read. We have clock out, semicolon. Then we go from this format, which is in UTC, to this format, hours and minutes, and again, put it in Los Angeles time, and then we do new line, new line. And so new line is actually a variable here inside of Make.com, and all new line does, it allows us to hit enter twice without it giving us some weird characters or anything like that. So that way, if there's multiple entries, it puts 2 new lines and then does clock in, clock out. 2 new lines, clock in, and clock out. This is going to be the easiest to read for someone inside of Airtable, and we're doing this because we want it to be very easy for the manager to go through and say, okay, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good, approve. So now once we have this, we can move on to the second step. We're going to wait a second again, so that way we don't hit API call limits, and we're getting the task details. And this is where a lot of the magic happens. And what I mean by that is this is where we can get the information so we can calculate the hourly pay or the flat rate pay. And so we go into data here. And before we get into that, we can see that we're getting the task information using that task ID that we set over here. So once we go into the data, we can see this information right here that it has the task name, it has a bunch of IDs in here, but what we're really looking for is one, the minimum and maximum time to complete, because this is going to show us the minimum time that it should take them to complete this task, as well as the maximum time it should take them to complete this task. For example, this one is 6 hours. If someone took 8 hours to complete this job, there's a problem with that and you're probably overpaying. And this is exactly why we're grabbing this information, because people were submitting time cards where they were working 10 hours for a job that should have only taken them 6. And so this is crucial information for us to pull and do some math with later. Now, besides this, we can also scroll down a little bit and we can go into the property section. And into the property section, of course, we see the address in which that we were looking for, and we can go into the description. And so the description is going to show us the information for flat rate. And so this flat rate is going to show us, okay, if the pay type is 1, which is flat, then we can go ahead and just take this 120 and put it right into Airtable. And this is where we're extracting that flat rate from. And so after we get this, now we're going to use some match patterns, some text parsers in order to get this out. For the set flat rate, we're using this regex pattern right here, which is going to look for anything that says flat dash $sign amount, or it's going to say flat rate dash $sign amount. And it can be capital F, capital R, lowercase f, lowercase r, just flat. And this is exactly how we're accounting for this. So once we run that through here, we can see that it puts in the whole description from before, this flat rate value right here. And then when we extract it, we're just getting this 120 number. So now we can say if flat rate is the pay type, just put in 120. Awesome. So now the next step is going to be a search records inside of Airtable. And the reason why we're searching records is so that way we can get the hourly pay. If we come back over here into Airtable and we go into the employee section, for this record right here, we can scroll over until we see pay, and we see that $22 an hour is their hourly rate. And now that we have this information from this search records module, we can then start to use this. And so after we get this, we go into another text parser, which is going to pull information out once again. And then we can see that it puts in the $22 an hour plus the flat cleaning, which we just got from Airtable, and it just extracts the 22. So we can multiply the 22 by the total time that they were clocked in, so that way we can get their estimated pay if it is an hourly job. So let's go into the clocked duration, which is going to be our next step. This is where we can see how long they were clocked in for. And so we did a bunch of math here to take the time tracked, and we're making it into a decimal, so that way we can use it to multiply against their hourly rate. Because if we multiplied the 4 hours and 32 minutes and 3 seconds that we had before, it's not going to give us the number that we need. Instead, we need 4.84 or whatever that number is, so that way we can multiply that and find that hourly rate. Okay, so the next step is the pay type. What we're doing is we're passing in that pay type, and we're saying if it equals 3, that means it's hourly. If it equals 1 or 2, that means it's flat. And so the reason why we're doing that is so that way when we go to put all this information into Airtable, we can do all this math in here, and we can also just map things specifically into here. We already have the employee name and the pay requested, as well as the approval status. So that's why we're not putting anything in here. We're just going to update that record. And so in order to update that record, we're getting the ID that we passed over from the other scenario, as well as we can get the ID right here from any one of these modules that we were getting information from before. So that way we're making sure that we're updating the correct ID. Moving through here, the first field that we're doing is estimating the pay. So we're doing if the pay type equals 3, then you're going to take the hourly rate and you're going to multiply it by the clocked duration. And you can see as I hover over this, you can see the module kind of pulsating in the background. So again, if the pay type equals 3, which means that it is an hourly job, then we're going to take their hourly rate and multiply it by the clocked duration. If it is not 3, then we are going to just put in the flat rate amount. And this is just using this if then kind of statement. In Make.com, you can use these all the time. I would definitely suggest checking out a YouTube video going over all of these in depth, so that way you can get a little bit more familiar with them. So we're just going to put the flat rate in there, so that way when the manager comes into the table, they can see that the flat rate was this amount and the requested pay that they're requesting is this amount. And then also we're going to put into here what that pay type is. Is it hourly or is it flat? Because if it's flat and the flat rate's $120, but they requested $158.60, that's obviously not right, and we need to look into that a little bit more. So moving on, the next one is going to be hourly rate. Hourly rate, we're just going to put into here. It's just what we extracted from before. So in this example, it would be $22 an hour. The minimum time to complete and the maximum time to complete are the two numbers that we got from the API call. This is set within Aperto, their CRM, where they're saying, okay, for this cleaning task, it's going to take us at least 4 hours to complete this. And the maximum time, absolute maximum time is to take you to complete this task is 6 hours. We want to put this into here so that way the manager can see that. And if they put time way over that, then they can go and see what was the maximum time that we allowed them to complete this task. And then they can go ahead and have a conversation with that employee. Why did it take you this long? This is a crucial step for making sure that they're saving money on payroll and not overpaying their employees. Then we're going into clocked hours. We're just using floor, so that way we can take the clock duration, which is about 4.34 or something like that, and we're just dropping the decimal, so it only gives us 4. It's basically just giving us an integer, a single number. For clocked minutes, we're using floor again, but this time we're subtracting the floor and then multiplying it by 60, so that way we can get the minutes instead of just the hours. So that way we can see, okay, they worked 4 hours, and then in a separate column, they worked 34 minutes. This just keeps it very granular, so that way we can see that. For the clock in and clock out times, this is the set variable that we did back here. So the set clock times, this is so that way we can see what their clock in and clock out times were. This is an example of how we did that. So for example, we had 2 entries that we saw in that API call. The first one was clock in time, clock out time, and there was a second collection which had a clock in and clock out time. We went ahead and did this math so that way it output something like this. And this was the one that was using the new lines. So that way we can put it into the Airtable and the manager can go ahead and see, okay, they worked from 10 a.m. to then 1:30 p.m. and then they clocked out, came back 2:15 p.m. to 3:22 p.m. They most likely went to lunch. This looks good. So we want to make sure that the manager can see that information so that way they can make that decision themselves. After we put all this information through make.com from the form fill, we go into Airtable and we can see this entry comes in right through here, and we're going to show you that in 1 second. All right, so I'm back onto the form. Let's go ahead and put in information that I know is going to work, so that way I can show you guys exactly how all this information is coming into the system. So I'm going to put in this person's name, do this job date, enter in this property, and I'm going to make sure that this is all good to go. So I'm going to click submit. It's going to come through this make.com scenario here. It's going to get passed over to here, and then it's going to run through this scenario here as well and enter all this information here into Airtable. And we can see this because it's automation writing this information in. So now we can see the unique identifier, the entry ID. We're using an auto number field here. This is always going to be pending approval. And then we can see the pay requested was 120. That's what we put inside of the form. And the estimated pay is what we used inside of make.com in order to estimate this. And so the pay discrepancy looks good. We're using a formula here. So it's going to look at the pay requested and the estimated pay. If it's within 5, it's going to say it looks good. If it's between 5 and 15, it's going to say review. And if it's over 15, it's going to say needs review. So that way the manager can understand how much of a discrepancy there is there. Next is going to be time discrepancy. So we're just looking at this and we're looking at maximum time to complete and then comparing it to the actual time that they're clocked. If the actual time that they're clocked exceeds the maximum time to complete, then it's going to say overtime. If it doesn't exceed that number, then it's just going to say on time, because if they're getting it done quicker, that's even better. Then we can come into here and we can go into pay type. Pay type is either going to be one of two options, either flat, hourly, or no pay, so 3 different types. And this is so that way the manager can see, okay, this pay type was flat, so it should just be 120. Now, if this said piece pay, then they would go over to their hourly rate, which is $22 an hour, and they would just have to multiply it by the actual time that they were clocked in, which is 4 hours and 58, not 4 hours and 58 minutes, but 4.58, which is 4 hours and 4.5 hours around there. And so they just multiply these two numbers together and then see what their requested pay was, so that way they can understand what that is. Next, we're going to look at minimum time to complete and maximum time to complete. This is the information that we got from the Aperto API, and we can see that the minimum time to complete was 4 hours. The maximum time to complete was 6 hours. So that way they can compare and see if they were within that time frame. And then the clocked hours is what they were actually clocked in for. In this case, it was 4 hours and 34 minutes, which is perfect. And then for the clock in and clock out times, like we said before, we wanted the manager to be able to see this very easily. So we went ahead and used those new lines. That way it creates a line break in between both of them. We can see the first clock in time, the first clock out time, the second clock in time, and the second clock out time. So that way they can make their guesses on why they were clocking in and out like that. The task name and all this information here is just ancillary information that we don't really need. So just the week start time, week end time, the property timesheet link, and everything like that. And so this is exactly how the system is going to look at this information and compare it for these managers. Then we can go into the interface that we made here inside of Airtable. We can see the dashboard for the average pay requested this week and the average estimated pay for this week. So we can see maybe they're estimating that they're supposed to be paying their employees a lot more, but the actual pay is a lot less. Then they can start adjusting how much that they're paying for these jobs that fits their business model. We can see any approvals here that need to be approved that are pending. And what we can do here, and this is categorized by employee name. We can go into this pending entries section. And this is just going to show all of the pending entries that are waiting to be accepted. So the manager can just pop into this table right here, go through all of these. If they look good, just go ahead and click on this. They can click into the record and then click approve. And once it's going to approved, it's going to go into the approved entries, and it's all good to go, and this employee will get paid. So this is the system that is saving the client a bunch of time, a bunch of hours per week, as well as making it very easy for them to not overpay on payroll and make sure that they have control over every aspect of the system. So if you're a business that has manual time entries from your employees, then I suggest setting up a system like this. If you want any questions answered on this system or you need help building something like this for your business, check the first link in the description below, and I'll see you guys later.